So I did a lot of research for preparing for Jesus Revolution. Not only did I look at the Time magazine article, I looked at YouTube footage of Lonnie Frisbee and Catherine Kuhlman and Chuck Smith and the early days of Greg Laurie. I also looked at what was going on in the civil rights movement at the time, what was going on in New York at the time. I really wanted to understand much more about the culture, the points of view of different people, the personalities, so that as I got into this character and got into this part, I was really trying to bring all of that history with me. Created a bio for my own character to really get into the history of his family and why he came out to California and why he needs this story to kind of save his own career and redeem himself. In my own life, faith has been meaningful to me because I'd be nowhere without it. Without my relationship with Christ, without my faith, I'd be nowhere. So it has been the superpower. I know in Hollywood, everybody wants to have a superhero movie and all the things that come with that. But faith is the real superpower. My entire life, my entire career has been a faith walk and a faith journey. And I'm excited and grateful to be able to say that. I think when I look at the world in our current time, the world needs this movie right now, because this movie can actually start the revolution again. We are living in a time that's divided, that is contentious, that is anxious, and I do think a film like this reminds us it's only about Jesus. That's it. And when we put the love of God and the love of Christ first, and last, what happens? Everybody comes together. All are welcome because God is love. And my hope is that this movie reminds people of that and that people will say, you know what? We got to get back to love. For me, working on this project, it already has changed me because of my day job. I'm a producer. So being in front of the camera and acting and getting a chance to play a character and bring that character to life, it's already changed me. I gain a whole appreciation for how difficult this is, to prepare the character, to learn the lines, to be present, to be authentic, to be natural, to take direction, and to have faith. I think audiences can look forward to one of the greatest trips, in cinematic history. Jesus Revolution, the movie it's going to take you back to a time with the fashion and the love and the music and the drama. So I think audiences are going to get a heartwarming story, a great drama, great comedy, great characters, but also a strong message of love and hope. When people leave the theater after watching this film, or after they stream it or wherever they watch it, they're going to feel more loved, and I think they're going to be more compelled to love. I did have some conversations with the filmmakers, about my look. I actually was exchanging photos and sent a few photos of who I thought we should try to model the look after. I looked up some journalists, some Black male journalists from back in the early 70s, late 60s, and, really sent up a couple pictures. I said, okay, well, here's about 5 different pictures of different men at that time who were in journalism that I think our character Josiah could look like. And so they hit me back, and they chose 2 of those pictures. So it was great to be able to work with them. And then once I got to the location, was able to work with the hair and makeup department to be able to create the look that I'm in now, and then was able to work with wardrobe and to get Josiah's clothes down. Remember, he's from New York, so he's going to bring that kind of New York, a little bit of sophistication, definitely put together, but he's on a mission. He's on a mission to figure out, is this true? Are the hippies really getting saved, or is this a new type of trip? The Jesus Revolution basically can be described as the hippies got saved. I mean, that's if you want to put it into one sentence. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, as the end of the hippie movement was happening, there was this movement sweeping a revolution, sweeping the country, where a lot of those in the hippie culture were finding Christ. And so this movie really talks about and shows one aspect of how that movement began and what was going on and what was involved in the hippies finding Christ. And Time magazine in 1971 did a cover story called The Jesus Revolution. That is iconic, historic, and it documents the entire movement and from all across the country. And so the catalyst for this film really is the Time magazine article. And this film, when you see it, it gives you the history, but then it works up to the Time magazine article. So Josiah is from New York and he works for Time magazine. And he has covered the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. He's covered the riots in LA. And he's given this assignment to go out to California and cover these, rumblings of hippies getting saved. And so he comes in and he's very skeptical. Again, he's from the East. He's coming to the West Coast. He has a fractured relationship with his own family. And he's coming here to just basically debunk the whole thing. He is not a believer. He wants to come out here and say the hippies are crazy. The whole thing's a cult. And that's what he wants the story to be. But as he gets here and he starts documenting it and he starts seeing for himself, he starts to realize, wait, this might actually all be true. And not only does he document what happens, he himself starts to think that maybe this wasn't just for him writing the article, there was something here for him too.
So the Jesus Revolution is very much about the spiritual revival that takes place at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s in Southern California. And it spread like wildfire through the entire country during a time when the country was very torn. War, Vietnam, make peace, love, make love, not war. The hippie movement was very countercultural, and they were people looking for truth. As it always does, Jesus fills the hole in people's lives. I was very attracted in the script to the message of hope that the film brings, I think, so beautifully to people. And it's not an old school Christian film that kind of alienates and judges or is like cheesy and lighthearted. It's heartbreaking, it's powerful, it's real. These are real people stories. And I very much got connected to the redemptiveness of it. To prepare for the role of Greg, specifically from his spiritual side, I went and watched a lot of his sermons. I just kind of wanted to see him like embody the pulpit, and like just watch how he connects with people. And I'm a Christian as well, and so I feel like I had a very good understanding of where he came from in his lost days, and after being baptized, after being saved, becoming a Christian, I feel like I was very in tune with that as well, and aptly situated to play the role. My faith is an extremely personal relationship. My parents are Christians, so I've been raised as a Christian, but I really made my faith personal, kind of turned a corner mentally, spiritually at 14 when I started working in film. And I realized after being outside my small town community in Idaho for the first time that I needed Jesus's help, support, strength, love. It is core and central to who I am. And it's just been a huge blessing to get to share the gospel in this way that I love, in this medium of film. I had a great time working with our directors, Jon and Brent. It was my first time working with the director combo, and one of the things that I had a question about going in was like, are you both going to be giving me like directions kind of like back and forth, or like kind of like over each other? What's the relationship going to be there? And not once did they like overlap each other. They were always really great about like communicating with each other and being on the same page before coming to the actors. And I so appreciate that, because in my process, like if I'm getting conflicting direction from people, then like I don't know like what the goal is, or the purpose that the directors have like in mind, right? And they did that beautifully. They worked it out. Just had an awesome working relationship on set, and I'm so thankful to them. This has been such an incredible journey, and if it weren't for the amazing directors that I get to work with, then these stories don't come to life. Working with Anna Grace Barlow was awesome. She is like a light on set, She just really brings this joy and wit to Cathe that I think it was just like, it was perfect. We did a chemistry read together before she was cast, and I was already set as Greg, and I remember talking with Brent, our director, afterwards. I was like, yeah, I think it's Anna Grace. She just knocked it out of the park, and just did such an incredible job. And she was so fun to have on set. And she's one of those people that when you work with, it's always like a good day on set. So that's awesome. Working with Kimberly was amazing. She is so talented. The first scene that I filmed with her was like one of our last in the movie. And it's one of those things where like, I wish like we had time to maybe film like scenes earlier in the film together, and then kind of like create the relationship, and then like film the last ones at the end. It just doesn't always work out that way in your, scheduling. But she and I were just totally in sync. And she was amazing. Just wonderful, nuanced performance of Greg's mom, and the hardships that women went through back in that time period. She's just beautiful, beautiful performance in this film. Working with Jonathan Roumie was such an incredible time. He is very giving as an actor to work across from. He's very like confident in his work, and he just has an amazing process just to watch. As a fellow artist, I had an incredible time with him on set, just getting to watch him do his thing. Really just wildly talented. He has a beautiful soul, and collaboration and working with people and just getting to have really great conversation is kind of, in my experience of his work ethic, is just kind of at the heart of what he does. And I will always be honored that I got to work with him. Working with Kelsey Grammer is very exciting and humbling at the same time, which is funny to think about. But he is such a legend. He has so much history in theater that his understanding of character and story is probably to the level of no one else that I've ever worked with. He can just have lengthy conversations about Shakespeare and these huge, beautifully, incredibly nuanced and detailed works of art. Just with no one else, I can't even think of another person that I can have those conversations with. And I just like to listen to him. He is so wise and has so much history in film. And I look up to him. I respect him. I honor him. And it was an absolute joy to get to be on screen with him and work with him. And I would love to do it again. Getting to play Greg has been such an honor, especially because of his relationship with Cathe. It starts out in wayward ways where they're just young and hanging out, and they're going to all these events and doing drugs and looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places. The relationship changes. They both come out of that. And it evolves. Greg starts going to church, and he's kind of introduced to God, and he, discovers there's a fulfilling life here, but it doesn't quite seem full without Cathe. And it's a beautiful relationship. And I personally got to see it acted out on set. Greg and Cathe were both there in real life on set with us, and just getting to see like how they talk with each other and how they banter and how they joke, and it was really great to have them on set with us as we were, portraying them. And we could ask them like, hey, what was your favorite like animal, and like what's your favorite color, and like what was your favorite song in like '69? Like at that point, what were you listening to? And like he would just tell us. I mean, like I would have full conversations with him and just kind of get like inspiration from him. And is a beautiful kind of like experience of like real life meeting art. 1969 was such a different time than 2022. And the production design for Jesus Revolution really helped me settle into my character and the time period. And I think the biggest thing for me was my sideburns and the clothes. And then our VW bus. We had, well, I don't know if it was technically VW, but we had this bus that we would drive around in on set, and it was epic. It was like hand painted with like all these like funny designs, and there was like this orange like carpet inside of it. It was just atrocious, and it was amazing. I loved it. The design of the film really helped me get into character because they did such a great job building a world on set that like once you're in that, you can kind of take it in and let it affect you. It just helped me so much. Except the fact that I was in 1969, because it was a no-brainer. So one of the fun things that we got to do for Greg was take him from a square to like a hippie. But then there's a fun, also a little bit of transition where we got to play with it, because he comes out of his military school and then he goes into public school, and he's trying to like fit in, but he's trying just a little too hard. And so he just kind of like shoots the moon a little, like just, he dresses outlandishly. And then we kind of like got to like tone it down and like bring it in a little bit and tighten it up a little bit. And towards the end, you kind of find Greg finding his hippie look, but it's more personalized after having spent time with the clothes and his friends, growing into his own personal, design of what he likes to wear. And Greg actually gave us a lot of input on like what I was wearing. He's like, this is great, and like, this is awesome. I love this. I had a jacket just like this. It's pretty cool. I think the wardrobe team did a fantastic job with that. Getting to meet Greg Laurie was really surreal. So I got to FaceTime with him before production started, and he's such a sweet guy. He's like, anything you need, any sort of questions you have, I would love to answer them. And I capitalized on that, actually. I got to ask him a bunch of questions, and we got to know each other pretty well. It was a little daunting at first, I'll admit, having, the person that you were supposed to be portraying on set while you're acting as them. But that nervousness definitely went away. He's such a great guy, and such a light and a joy to have on set. And I'm really thankful that I got to tell his story, and I hope that it just has a profound effect, and people are really moved by it. I'd say one of my favorite scenes to film would have to be the baptism scene, and then the bad trip in the rain. Those two scenes are so important in Greg's life, and getting to do both of them in very cold water will always sear them into my mind. The night that we did the bad trip, it was upper 40s, and I was in the rain for maybe 5 to 6 hours, and I was very cold by the end of the night. And it was just a powerful scene, getting to sit down with Jonathan in the rain on the ground and kind of have this like connection, and questioning it, and the effect that it has on him later when he sees Jonathan on the lawn. Oh, wow, like that guy's real. He wasn't a hallucination from my trip, you know? So that was definitely super fun to film. And it was one of those scenes where, like, I'm proud of myself for getting through this scene because at the end, we're just trying not to shake because it was so cold in that water. And then, obviously, his baptism, because that's the first step in, you know, a new life with Christ. And it's the, you know, pivotal moment in someone's life of being born again. And for Greg, that's at the core of who he is Christ. So that scene is super important. Also, I got to shoot that with Jonathan Roumie, which was such an honor. Just a powerful, powerful moment in any Christian's life. So it was an honor to do. It's my hope that people will take a few things away from this movie, and it's a message of hope. Life is hard, and it can really get you down. There's no doubt about that. But there is a hope, and there is peace, and there is grace in life stemming from Jesus. And I hope that people can accept that because of all the crap that Greg goes through before he's saved. Some Christians are judgmental and they'll say like, oh, like you're too crazy or you've been through too much, but like Jesus can forgive everything and all. And that is like the most ultimate message of hope is forgiveness. And so grace, hope, and forgiveness, I think are the biggest three things that I would like for people to get out of our story.
You know, it's an amazing screenplay. You rarely read scripts that speak to you on so many different levels. There's comedy, there's drama, there's tenderness, there's complexity with all of the characters, especially with Lonnie Frisbee. Lonnie Frisbee was a very, very complex human being. He was a brilliant, gifted, spiritually powerful man, but he had a lot of wounds. And so his humanity leaked out of him every step of the way. It was just so beautiful to see like this opportunity to play somebody that had these human weaknesses and flaws and these characteristics, but who was so profoundly gifted in the spirit and in being able to heal people and in being able to inspire people and to attract crowds just by speaking his heart to them. So my prep for Lonnie included a number of things that could connect me to him personally. So I went and visited his grave in Southern California about a week or two before we started filming, for starters, meaning after I read about him, after I watched all the video that I could find on him, after I, read everything that Wikipedia and other people's opinions had to say about him, much of which is largely off base. And then I started getting connected to people that actually knew him and worked with him and ministered with him at the time he was at Calvary Chapel, like in this period of time that we are telling the story, which was was invaluable. It's all been just a joy. I didn't know what it was going to be like to work with Kelsey Grammer. And he's such a beautiful soul and just an easy to work with, easygoing, super talented professional. So filming with him has been great. The cast, all the cast in this is they're just insane. They're stellar, super talented people. Joel and Anna Grace and Allie, everybody's just been so fantastic to work with and just present at all times. I hope audiences are inspired by this film in simply seeing how God is able to use anyone he pleases, anyone whom he chooses, despite their weaknesses, regardless of their perceived strengths, and use them in any way that he wants to help accomplish his will and to introduce more people to who he is. God can use anybody he wants, no matter how fractured or broken or flawed, and create miracles from the most unexpected sources. Like there's this piece, there's this leather mantle that Lonnie had a deerskin mantle, which is like a cape that he wore for a time, and was kind of integral to some of his preaching services, and without giving anything away. And there was a design that he had made on it. He had painted on the back of it. So they wanted to include that as part of his wardrobe. And I'm like, that's amazing. I love that. And I told them that I was also a painter. I was a visual artist, and that I had some ideas. And, Anna said, I would love to see some thoughts. And so I did some sketches and sent stuff to her, and we started collaborating. Joel Courtney. So I don't think I have enough time in the day to speak about my love for Joel Courtney. He is one of the most committed, talented young guys that I've ever worked with, and he comes ready to play, and whatever you throw at him, he'll just flex and just roll with it. And he's incredibly vulnerable and open, and so easy to work with. It was a joy to get to do our scenes together. I mean, Kelsey Grammer, he's a legend. Where do you... I'm speechless. The fact that I got to work with him was a highlight of my career. He's just a comic genius. The fact that there were a few moments that we had comedically to work together, and I was given the freedom to improvise with him was just, it was just an absolute joy. So, you're in the presence of a master of his craft when you could be literally having a conversation about what you had for dinner last night, and then they call action, and then he's right in it. Just tears, whatever the scene calls for, he's right there. So I was in awe watching him work, and it's such a privilege. Anna Grace is one of the sweetest people that I've ever met in my life. To me, she truly embodies the spirit of Cathe Laurie. And having met Cathe Laurie and being friends with Cathe, like, she was perfectly cast. She's incredibly emotionally available as an actor, just can get there on a dime, and is just has such a huge heart that she easily shares with cast members. The production design on Jesus Revolution is extraordinary. I mean, every detail was thought of. Every inscription on a wall that a hippie in the scene had written, a year, 2 years, 3 weeks earlier to when the scene actually takes place. You got the sense of the history with every step that you walked in. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you're working on a project and you just kind of sense the artifice of the design of the set pieces, and that was not in any way the case with Jesus Revolution. It was the opposite times 10. You just felt like you were living in the 1970s, in the middle of this movement, and there was an excitement, there was an electricity. It was like stepping back into time. I guess the one that really struck me the most was when we were doing the baptism scenes. We're filming one of the scenes, and I'm, as Lonnie Frisbee, baptizing people coming into the water in Costa Mesa at Pirates Cove. In the middle of a take, there's this woman that's kind of wading in to the water. And the cameras are like on the other side of the beach there, but they're filming. And she says to me, as she's walking in, "I have to tell you something." And I thought, "Oh, sure, yeah. What do you got?" And she's like, "I want to do this for real." And I said, you want to be baptized for real. She said, yeah, can we do that? I said, bring it, let's do it. So she comes in and I said, what's your name? And for the sake of this, I'll just call her Jenny. She said, my name's Jenny. I said, hey, Jenny, I'm Lonnie, because I'm in character, so I'm trying to stay in character, because that's how I work. And I said, well, Jenny, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? She's like, with all my heart. And I said, do you repent of all your sins? She said, every single one of them. And she was starting to get emotional. And I said, and I took her, like you see in the scenes, and I said, well, Jenny, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And I dunk her all the way in. We bring her up. And she was just crying. And she's like, thank you so much. And she gave me a huge hug. And the beautiful thing is that you see a number of people in the scene after they've been baptized, and everybody's clapping. And you get to see a little glimpse of her coming out of the water, just like radiant. Yeah, so that was a really beautiful moment for me. I'd never baptized anyone before, so that's gonna stay with me forever. What I hope people take away from Jesus Revolution after they see it is that there's a place for them in God's family. All of us are God's children, but not all of us feel like that. And hopefully this movie will give people an opportunity to really experience what it means to be loved by God and the examples that were set by the people whose lives we're depicting in the film. I think this film is going to affect people on a level that many of them are not ready for, but are desperately seeking. And so I pray that happens, and it's not just a film, that it's an experience for them.
I just dug a lot, and I was able to use Greg Laurie himself as a resource for images that I thought were perfect. I love using real historical images to inspire me. I love real stories. And I did my own research, watched a lot of documentaries about Lonnie, about the Jesus Revolution. So that was a lot of my preparation, was being able to just dig up all this history. I love history. It's probably the reason I love my job so much, is that I get to sort of retell a time period and create a world that existed at one time, and hopefully do it in a way that is relatable to modern day, but makes you feel something, that you were there and you experienced it. One of the things that I love so much about filmmaking is collaboration. I think it's one of the most exciting parts of the journey, is getting to work as a team. It's something that I get excited about. And so I got a lot of that experience with Brent, and Brent was really passionate about the story as well as I was. So it was fun. I feel like we did a lot together. And I think also Amy, the production designer, we put our heads together a lot too. I love that experience. It's just, I don't want to feel alone in the process. I love people, and I love experiencing something as a body of people. I think one of the things that I really wanted to do is just creating that world that felt very authentic, that felt very natural, and almost like it wasn't something that was going to take you outside of the story, but it was going to actually invite you into it. So the colors are very warm and inviting. The tone of the lighting and everything just felt very glowy, and there's nothing that we did or I hope we didn't do, that took you out of the story. That was really just an opportunity to step into this piece of history. So that was something I think we did well. That's one of my favorite things about the job too, is I love digging up resources. I did thrift stores, I did antique shops, I did estate sales. And so you'll see pieces in the movie that were actually made out of bed sheets from the 70s. You know, I want things to have some history to them. I want them to feel like they are natural to the character. So we used a lot of vintage materials. And so if we built something from a piece of vintage material, we would add more age to it so that it felt like it came out of their closet. And so I wanted everything to have a very nice worn in feel to it, because that was part of telling that sort of warm story, is that there's life that has been lived in these garments. There's a lot of extras. It was so vital to the story, but dressing that many extras in period costumes is challenging. The thing that I kept saying all the time was, I feel the summer glow of California. And that's what I wanted. I wanted everything to have that glow. So with Greg, he was the son of a single mother. And so he didn't have a lot of money. He was in military school. And so that was as refined as you ever saw him. Outside of military school, he was worn in. There was a lot of clothes. He probably would have gotten a lot of his clothes from, you know, a thrift store. By the time you see him evolve through the middle of the movie, he really has come into his own and really has this very natural feel about him. He wasn't trying to be too showy. So a lot of his costumes felt a little bit more natural than most, you know, didn't feel too out there hippie, but he was trying to find himself. I love the character of Lonnie. I just think he's so interesting. Obviously, one of the highlight pieces of what we built was his cape. And when you see him for the first time introduced, you're like, whoa, who is this character? He's a character. He is somebody that's interesting. So we wanted to do that with him. We didn't want his clothing to be loud and distracting. We wanted it to tell a story. We wanted it to tell that he has personified something that he is attached to. And one of the things that you see is that he wears these tunics all the time. He has this sort of natural, sort of, for lack of a better description, Jesus-like, you know, persona, and which is the real Lonnie, which is, he really embraced that. The first time we see him, he is standing in front of his congregation of a very tightly wound people. They're all very put together. They all have their sport coats on or their suits on and their ties, and their women are very coiffed, you know. And I wanted him to be that, but I also wanted him to have this sort of warmth and inviting sort of presence about him. So I put him in this blue suit. And I just loved it because Kelsey has these striking blue eyes. And so I wanted him to feel very much like you were attracted to what this man was on the inside, because there was something more to him than what his congregation was. And then as we see him progress throughout the film, one of my favorites is that I get back to this blue color on him and he's wearing this blue Hawaiian shirt. And I'm like, this is now the fully evolved Chuck. He has completely let it all go and he doesn't care anymore about sticking to some sort of conformity in his congregation. He's given it up and he's free. There were just moments that I think that for me as a costume designer, I get to really embrace a story. And I tell my team all the time, our job is to tell the audience who this person is before they ever say a word. So without words, we need to be able to express who this character is in the way that we present them. We look at someone and we sort of assess who they are by the expression of what they're wearing. So I think it's an important element of storytelling. So for us, it's something we really take a lot of effort to do, is to really be able to go, do I understand who this person is if they never have a line? You know, if they never have any dialogue, do I know who this person is by just what they're wearing? So I think that we put a lot of effort into it to tell the story.
Jesus Revolution has been a film that I've wanted to make for a very long time. I just believe that so much came from America's last spiritual revival, awakening, and we need another one of those. We need this to happen again. My generation has never experienced anything like this, and I want to experience it. So it just began a 7-year obsession with revival, with the Jesus movement, and with this desire to utilize my gifts and the gifts of our team to tell the story. I remember talking to people that lived in the Jesus movement, and I just said, how much did this spiritual awakening and revival, how much did desperation have to do with it? And they said it was everything. It was just a desperate time. Just the idea of like, where can I find hope and where can I find answers? These were all questions that were being asked then, and they're all questions that are being asked now. So I think after COVID, in the world we live in, the story is even that much more relevant. Greg was a teenager, as was his wife, Cathe, at the very origin of the Jesus movement in Southern California. He was a part of it. And so we just bonded and just became great friends. And the idea was, how can I use my skills as a filmmaker and his skills as a pastor and as an evangelist, and how can we tell this story? And how can we tell it in a way that will make a generation say, maybe this could happen in my time and in my generation. Greg was always right there. So there's just a level of authenticity and accuracy and heart that he added, because he's been a pastor for over 40 years. Whenever we're telling someone's story, I mean, it's my movie, but it's their story. And so having a great friendship and collaboration is the most important part. It's going to end up being a really special film. And I think it's really going to be able to change lives. Our hope is that this happened before in America, this can happen again in America. We need another Jesus revolution. So to feel for 2 hours that you're caught up in it, and that you're a part of it, and that you're a part of all these people that were so different from each other, hanging out and loving each other. It makes you instantly feel like, man, can this happen again? As we made the movie, I got my first taste and my first glimpse into revival and spiritual awakening. And it began to happen on the set. And we all began to experience it. And that was my hope. And I think that's what the audience is going to feel as well. And if it happens when people watches the movie, maybe it'll happen in our time, in our generation. That's the hope. I would say that filming the Jesus Revolution was magical. I've had more fun making the movie than I have in so long. And there was just something so powerful about it. I felt like God was just in the movie and what we were doing, and it felt like being strapped to a rocket, you know, and there was a lot of, you know, whatever you want to call them, moments of divine intervention, God moments as we made the film. The most important to me was, it was very important that we go back to the actual Pirates Cove and film the baptisms there. And as a film producer, that is not a logical decision. Pirates Cove is a crater. You can't get to it. You have to hike over it. The surface of the rocks is like the surface of Mars. I mean, it's sharp rocks and sort of dangerous. It's not the safest location. It's not the easiest location, but it's the real location. And I just felt it was very important that we go back to where this stuff actually happened, and we do it there. And so that's what we strove to do.
I think early on, this is one of the things that attracted me to him.
It's in the movie.
Was he said to me, if you ever get between me and my relationship with God, it's over. What I needed to hear was that I was not the be-all and end-all of this man's life. I never wanted to be on anyone's pedestal. I didn't want to feel suffocated, like I had to meet all of his needs, make him happy all the time, be the perfect wife or the perfect anything. So he was saying, you have an important place in my life, but you are not the most important person in my life. It's God.
I've had to mature and grow up and realize that it's not all about me. The world doesn't revolve around me. I'm not a solo guy anymore. I have other people I'm responsible for. Everything that happens to me, I want her to be a part of it. So I always come to Cathe first. You know, she's my first line of defense, my first counselor, my first kind of, what would you call it, sounding board, you know? I just thought she was, you know, Cathe she was and is, she's intelligent. I didn't want her to think, oh, you're so wonderful and hang on my every word. Cathe would give you feedback. And if she didn't agree, she would tell you she didn't agree. And so I like that, because I was looking for a strong woman.
Meeting Greg, from the day I met him, I knew there was something very special and different about him. It seemed like God was always opening surprising doors. He was extraordinary in that way. He has been laser focused since the day I met him on what he wanted to do. And there's never been any wavering or questioning of the calling that he felt on his life from the time I met him. I think so many of us that were drawn into the hippie movement had sort of the same desires, the search for real meaning and purpose. And it wasn't just a rebellion against the establishment just for the sake of wanting to be different. I think we really were searching for a better way to live, a more purposeful life. But when I met Greg, I saw this amazing combination of spirituality, but authenticity, of being who he was, not trying to become somebody else, still appreciating his sense of humor. He grounded me in the fact that, you know, Christianity lives in the real world. It doesn't live on a mountaintop somewhere. So I was very much attracted to that, very much. To see that I didn't have to become a different person. I loved the whole hippie vibe. I loved the way it looked. I loved all of that music. I didn't have to stop all of that, clean my act up, and now become a nice little church girl. I could still be who I was, and that those external things were not important to God for the most part. I am so praying that this movie will bring hope to a generation. Seeing it through the eyes of my parents, the fear and dismay they had, and anxiety over the youth of that day would have been tremendous in their lives. Watching a whole generation of kids experimenting with drugs and doing what they were doing. But there was hope. And in the midst of that crazy time, God sovereignly poured out what we call his Holy Spirit upon a generation of young people. And so I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm praying it does happen again. So that's my greatest hope and prayer, is that parents and kids that feel hopeless will see hope in this story, and that it can happen again, and it can happen for anyone. And it begins with an individual saying yes to Jesus.
I became friends with Jon Erwin, who's the director of Jesus Revolution, years ago. And he had that Time magazine with Jesus on the cover. He was literally obsessed with it. And I think he's the right guy for this project. I think as it's coming together, and I've seen scenes from this film now, I've just been blown away. I think this is going to be the best film the Erwin brothers have ever done together. And I'm really honored that he's featured us in his story and allowed us to be a part of this project. And he also has two other primary characters, and it's Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee. Chuck was the pastor of Calvary Chapel of Costa Mesa, sort of a struggling church. And Lonnie was this roving hippie evangelist who was just filled with fire and passion. And they were just so right together, because Lonnie was sort of like the magnet that drew young people in. And Chuck was a stabilizer that kept people in. You know, we came for Lonnie, we stayed for Chuck. I had to grow up and take care of myself, because I literally was not being parented. So I had to, in a way, be a parent to my mother. So when the whole drug culture is coming on, you know, churn on, tune in, drop out, and don't trust anyone over 30, that resonated with me, because everyone I knew over 30 was not a good example. I think where a lot of kids at 17 were just being 17-year-olds, I felt like I was a 70-year-old in a 17-year-old body, because I'd seen so many things already. And it got me searching, and I wanted something better, something pure, something real. I didn't know it was God. If this movie can inspire and give hope to a young person and tell them no matter how adverse their circumstances are, or how bad their home life is, or how bad their environment is. They can get through this, and there's hope in the future. And I hope this movie will give some of that hope to people. In America, we've had 4 great spiritual awakenings. The Jesus movement was the last. I feel like we're overdue for another. What we're praying is even more than having a great time in the theater or watching it at home if you stream it later. Our greatest hope is that they would say, could God ever do this again? Let's pray for that. And if that were to happen, that would be the greatest reward of seeing this film made. I think you're going to be very entertained. There's some laugh out loud moments in this film. There's some choke up, maybe you'll cry moments in the film, very uplifting moments. And I think you're going to see something on the screen you've not seen before. This story has never been told. And this is a significant story that changed our nation and in many ways changed the world. And my hope is that not only will you be entertained and see a great movie, but I hope that you'll find hope for your future and open your heart to a relationship with God.
I remember standing in the kitchen saying, how do we tell our generation what we found? How do we tell our generation that Jesus is the answer when nobody's expecting to find the answer in church in the subculture at that time? I mean, it was, very divided. People weren't really looking to churches for answers. And before we knew of the wave that became known as the Jesus movement, and we knew we had to make a record.
Chuck Smith, he didn't have an agenda. I once called him to his face the most open-minded, closed-minded man I ever had met. Because when it came to the Bible and doctrine, he was very narrow-minded, but he was broad-minded enough to allow our drummer to do a drum solo on the stage at church. And then that was unheard of.
It was 1970, and people who looked like us with long beards and coming out of the drug culture, it just really scared church people. We learned really quickly there's lots of ways to do church, and that the Holy Spirit would have to build a bridge. Otherwise, we had no communication with a lot of very conservative people.
So that's why I think our music is important, because secular music can touch you just like a touching movie, but it's a very low, it's in the soul and in the mind, where our music can hit you in the spirit and the heart. That's a big difference. My hope for it is that it can revisit something that was very real and very powerful 50 years ago, plus years ago, and inspire people that it can happen again. I believe it can happen again in a different way and impact the world, and maybe bring people back to square one, because we've gotten kind of off the path a little bit with all of our entertainment, worship, and some of the stuff that we have in the church today. So maybe back to the basics a little bit. That's my hope for the movie.
The way I describe it is that there's 2 different kind of stories that wind up converging. There's Cathe and Greg, who meet at a place in their life where they're a little lost, and they both come together and they find their faith together. And then there's also Chuck, who is dealing with his kind of failing church and winds up meeting Lonnie Frisbee, who he kind of brings into the mix. And Greg and Cathe wind up, hearing Lonnie Frisbee speak and getting involved with him. And that's where the storylines come together. I love that it's a bunch of imperfect people that come to faith, and I think that nobody is depicted as holier than thou or better than, and it's a story of a bunch of sinners, and I just thought that that was so real. I love Cathe's, kind of friction with her parents and how far she comes. She's got such a strong personality. She's unapologetic in how she feels, and she fights for things, and she's like me. I saw myself in how the character was written, and I really, really wanted to play her. There's an emotional sort of climax in the movie where Cathe and Greg are having one of their, friction moments. And it was my first night of filming that we did that. And Joel and I had rehearsed together a little bit, so we did know each other, but to do that scene so early on, to kind of get it out of the way, was really nice. And it was amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing that, because I love acting with Joel so much. I mean, doing a faith-based film with people who are all believers or people of faith, there's a different vibe. It's like there's kind of a peaceful vibe. It's sort of a joyful, peaceful place to work, really, even when the days are long and it's cold or it's hot. It's the vibe is really, really good. That's something I've noticed about working on this movie, and I've really loved it. It's something I'd like to take with me to other sets and try to recreate for sure. I feel like audiences are going to love Jesus Revolution because it has this sort of retro feel. The music is going to be amazing. The costumes are amazing. The hair is amazing. It's going to be so inviting to watch. It's going to look so warm. And it's a love story. And it's a story of finding yourself, finding your way, finding faith. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I just think it's going to be so uplifting and heartwarming, and people are going to love it. When I was preparing to come out and film, I got to talk to Cathe on the phone, and Greg just so happened to be at home at the time, and so they could be on speakerphone, and they were texting me like wedding photos. It was incredible, and kind of talking about their relationship. And she said she was kind of back and forth and wishy-washy, and then they would, as soon as he kind of went away, she'd be like, okay, I actually want him again. And so they had this kind of will they, won't they, and such a fun, playful, sort of childlike, innocent sort of love. And the fact that they've been able to, you know, make that extend like a lifetime is incredible. And so their love stories are inspiring to me because it was imperfect, and they're very open about their story and how it wasn't always like sunshine and butterflies and rainbows. And they have really worked and fought for their life together, and they're just truly amazing people who love each other and, you know, chose each other. I love that about their love story and how that's depicted in the script as well. And Redmon's incredible. She picked the most incredible vintage pieces and like modern pieces that look vintage, and then custom pieces that look vintage. And she worked with a seamstress named Sophie, who is unbelievable as well. And they just had endless cute stuff. And I feel like I'm not Cathe, but Cathe's like accessories, like what I feel like I put on my rings, and like I had my hair done by my amazing hair maker people. So right now, I feel like Cathe. And so the costumes and wardrobe and all that stuff really helps you feel like you are the character. And it's such an incredible job. I remember the first day, you know, in the late 60s, 70s, we wore a lot of bell bottoms, a lot of jeans, and trying on jeans can be, first of all, a workout, second of all, a little stressful. And she just wheeled in this huge rack of like jeans, like vintage, like modern, whatever. She was like, I'm going to put you in a room alone with these jeans, and you try them on, and you just move the ones that you don't like or that don't work to the end, and then I'll make outfits after that. And I just loved her from that very first moment. I was like, that was so nice. And everything was so cute. So she's just the greatest, just so talented. I'm so lucky to wear these clothes. I've never worked with two directors before, like Brent and Jon directing together. It's so cool. You have two people to ask all your questions. And honestly, it makes you feel like you're bugging them a little less because there's two of them. So that has been something really cool. And I feel like I've watched them direct more, and they're incredible and both such visionaries.
I'm playing Chuck Smith in Jesus Revolution, which is the story of an actual period not too long ago in history, our contemporary history of America, where Jesus made a comeback of sorts through the hippie movement. Well, it's about faith and love and God and all those things that come along for the ride, but those thoughts and concepts and realities, honestly. They all exist. I was asking for God to step in and say, well, here's a little something for you. This might remind you of what you used to feel like when you were a kid. Well, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the first one where he invites the hippies into his church. He's a man sort of at a loss before he accepted this job. He doesn't really know where he's going and how his church is going to fare, whether or not he's even going to remain a preacher. And then this opportunity presents itself to him. And this kid walks and he thinks, I'm going to open up the church to this. And it's a pretty amazing thing. If it's a good story and you tell it honestly, there are going to be a lot of people that want to know about it and who will really enjoy it. I do think we exist at a time in our society and in our country that is kind of screaming out for a little bit of faith, a little bit of something to believe in. Renewal. I hope people feel cheerful and joyful all at the same time, and maybe inspired to rediscover their own faith. Greg is here as an advisor, consultant, / whatever, resident expert. I mean, he's lived it. It's pretty neat to have Greg Laurie walk up to you and start telling you what Chuck was about. But what's been fun here is that there's so many extras, at least today, while we're shooting this, that knew Chuck themselves, were baptized by him, attended his church. Calvary Church was just one little place that he ran, and there are now thousands around the country. It's quite a dynamic thing that happened. And what Greg said that I thought was pretty relevant was he said, we were all kind of searching for a good dad. And Chuck gave him that.
This schedule was very, very challenging. And at times, Jon and I would actually have to break off from each other, and I would have to shoot with a unit, and he would shoot with a unit because we were trying to catch up on time. But I got to shoot when Chuck Smith's daughter picks up this hippie who turns out to be Lonnie Frisbee, and she realizes he's a believer, but he's also a hippie, so she invites him to meet her father. I'm a huge fan of that scene. So my angle into the score on this one is using rock players that actually lived in the 60s, and we're going to use all-period guitars, all-period synthesizers, all-period drums, and actually have a 60s rock band, session players that are older that lived in the 60s. I'm going to hire those guys, and that's going to be the meat and potatoes of my score, working with live players, and it's going to sound like we just created additional hits from the 60s, basically. So actually going back to period and using that formula to generate most of the score. I hope that people see this film and it's a call back to love, because that's what this world needs right now. Love is the most perfect thing that we have. It's our template, and to see these flawed human beings coming together, trying to work it out, but finding a way to love each other and create this community with these very disparate groups of people. I think that's such an important window to look into right now in this divided world in which we find ourselves today. So I think what I want people to take from it is how beautiful Christianity can be when the core of it is being driven by love. And I really think this film is a callback to that, and I really hope people feel that when they see this movie. I think the thing that's so exciting about Jesus Revolution is that there's something for everybody. It's a fun ride. It's so comic. We had an amazing cast that brought the jokes. We would just let them go off script sometimes, and we ended up with just some of the funniest moments in the film. So it's going to be an amazing fun ride. The cast on this is the greatest cast I've ever had a chance to work with, as well as the crew. Everybody showed up to work, and you can see it on the screen. The production design, the cinematography, the story, the script, everything just is hitting on all cylinders. I'm so excited to share this story with the world. I think it's a very timely movie for this period in which we live today. And I think it has the potential to really get people thinking about their life and their faith in a different way. I have to brag on Anna Redmon, our wardrobe designer. She just came in with such a vision. They went to estate sales and bought old shower curtains and old sheets and found old Afghans and just fabric swatches that had been in people's attics. And they hand created all of these original costumes from scratch, using vintage found materials that were so interesting and so unique. And so some of your favorite outfits that you see in our movie is probably made from curtains. And I'm not joking. I had done a bunch of research into the Jesus movement, and I'm a huge fan of Chuck Smith and what he did. And so especially their rendering of Chuck Smith and Lonnie, I thought was just amazing. And that whole story, I just thought they nailed it. I think one of the things that excited me most about the script was the theme. The theme is loving the other, creating a place of belonging, compassion, understanding, empathy for people that don't look like you, maybe don't carry the same beliefs as you. And there was this generous, graceful place created for all these people to come together. And in this sense of belonging, there was this new, super loving version of Christianity happening back in the day with these very unlikely groups of people coming together in one space. And so I just think getting back to these themes of love, acceptance, forgiveness, belonging, compassion, empathy, I think that's what our world needs. I think our world really needs to heal, and we need to come away from all this divisiveness and all this politics and like get back to the tenet of the thing, which is love. And so that's what I love about this script. The production design, the cinematography, the story, the script, everything just is hitting on all cylinders. I'm so excited to share this story with the world. I think it's going to be a super highly entertaining film that surprises you in places. I think it's gonna be more film than people are expecting it to be. And I think on top of all the fun, exciting entertainment value in our movie, I think people are gonna leave the film really touched and really changed. And I think it's a very timely movie for this period in which we live today. And I think it has the potential to really touch a lot of hearts and get people thinking about their life and their faith in a different way.
I mean, it was so, when we cast him, I was like, oh, this will be interesting. I know Kelsey's a really great actor, first and foremost, but I wondered how much he'd be really into this. And all of a sudden, we started to witness Kelsey's portrayal of Chuck in some of these big scenes where Chuck's preaching. It was unbelievable. I mean, he literally knows how to command dialogue in a way that many preachers don't. He wanted to know everything from how certain Christian lingo was to how Chuck might have used his hands to how he, what his cadence was and how he was as a person. And it meant a lot to Kelsey to be able to portray Chuck as accurately as he possibly could. I think the story of faith, Jesus Revolution, is so timely because if you look at what we've just come out of, we come out of a season of a pandemic, and here Jesus Revolution is a movie that offers an absolute amount of hope in something that we don't have to put our focus on a virus or things or this fear of the unknown when our focus is actually on Jesus and our focus is on him and that he is our comforter and he is our strength and he is our love and our joy and our peace and our patience. And if this story actually gets out there in a time such as this, I think it has the ability to transform people's lives. We looked at Alabama for a big chunk of it because we shot I Still Believe there, and it was really good, kind of a good example of being able to double California for, lower Alabama, and it kind of worked. And so shooting 4 weeks in Alabama kind of helped us put the whole package together. But we always knew we needed some time here in Southern California in Orange County, especially at Pirates Cove, because it's really a character. And so we didn't want to double Pirates Cove anywhere else. So that was really significant. So in the beginning, we're like, well, maybe we only need 2 or 3 days in Orange County. But at the end, I think we're going to end up with 6 or 7. And I'm really happy with the locations that we chose in Southern California because they're really epic. I mean, they're incredible. And the happening is like Woodstock. I mean, literally, it was just this massive event, this outdoor festival, if you want to call it that. That was kind of an eye-opening, experience of all these hippies and Jesus freaks kind of coming together that really impacted Greg in such a significant way. And so originally we were going to do that in Alabama, and we kind of scouted a location on the tech scout actually a week before we started shooting. And I was the one that pulled the plug on that. I said, no. We got to shoot this in California. I want audiences to be encouraged. I mean, obviously, I think there's a part of history that people will learn a ton about this movement and these 2 stories. But I also want them to be encouraged. I want them to have this rush of hope that they'll leave the theater feeling much better about their life, no matter where they are at in their journey, than they were before they walked into the theater. And so if that happens at any level, no matter what it is, I mean, whether they're a Christian or not a Christian or whatnot, if they leave the theater feeling encouraged, inspired, then we've done our job. I think Jesus Revolution has a lot of facets to it. And so there's obviously the love story between Greg and Cathe that is so sweet. I think the struggle that these characters go through and the journey that they go through is universal in its storytelling, meaning kind of like an inside peek at what it was like to live during this time period. And we just get to experience these stories, these particular stories as they were often told, but you actually are feeling like you're in the moment and in the movement. Yeah, Jesus Revolution is, it's a true life story. Our main characters are Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith, who are two mega pastors based out of Orange County, California, and the origin story of how their churches and their ministry kind of came to existence. That's one side of it. But the other side is kind of how a community, a culture that of these kind of misfits, these sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of hippies, all of a sudden were kind of tired of one life and decided that, oh my goodness, there's something better out there if we go and we just get saved and become Christians. And this whole movement that kind of started in Orange County, California, and really literally swept across the country. Jonathan Roumie plays Jesus in The Chosen. It's the first time that we ever saw him. And thank you, Lord, for delaying this production, because I don't think we would have been aware of Jonathan if we had done it the first go round. And so when Jon Erwin and I saw The Chosen, we're just like, that guy's incredible. And man, it's Jon's idea. I mean, to say, hey, I know who Lonnie is. I'm like, who? He goes, Jonathan. I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, it was just like, that's the smartest thing ever. Not just because he's in The Chosen, but he looks like, his hair is long. He looks like him. If you look the pictures side by side, and the performance that he's giving is incredible.
Well, I'm a mom. So I always relate to that part of a character. Although I'm not the kind of mom Charlene was, I do relate to wanting to be a good mom, which I believe Charlene probably wanted to be at some point, even though she made a lot of poor choices. She was human and wanted to be glamorous and wanted to be so many things. And she fell short in so many ways, but I relate to that part of her wanting to be everything and then falling short. I loved playing this character of Charlene. First of all, I have to hand it to my hair team who created this phenomenal wig, just brought Charlene to life. And then the makeup team was phenomenal. Just like researching the makeup from the period and just making slight little tweaks. And I mean, those people, that team was across the board phenomenal. And then the wardrobe team, really getting these incredible costumes. So that really, really helped me transform. And that's what I wanted. That's what I was so excited about with this character, was being able to just sort of Kim disappear and Charlene emerge. And I felt like with the team around me and the support and the script, that was able to happen. Anna Redmon showed up at my house in Franklin, Tennessee with a ton of fantastic vintage items that I immediately loved. Anna's phenomenal, and the stock that she had, the options that she had were just amazing. Some of them were original vintage pieces, and some of them they built from scratch. And the wardrobe was so important for this character. And we talked about wanting Charlene to be glamorous, because that was something that was really important to her, was looking right, having her nails done, her lipstick on, and looking presentable. And so Anna really got that and added so much to Charlene. I think the production value in this film is incredible. The history, the music, the storytelling is wonderful. I mean, to me, it feels like we've just been dropped into a moment in history. And so it's nostalgic in a lot of ways. And then at the core of it also is a really compelling journey of someone with a really broken life and a broken heart, finding faith, finding love, finding wholeness. as he goes along. And that's a beautiful story. I love every single look. I love all of these looks for Charlene. But I will say the first dress that I appear in the film, in the bar, Charlene is in her prime. She's, she was very charming. So she's just like got people around her and she feels great. And they had me in this gorgeous, gorgeous dress that they built from scratch. That's like this silky tapestry with like a floral pattern on it, and just the way it's cut and like some pearls. I thought that was phenomenal. Also, when they head to California, I love these like headscarves. So when we head to California, I love that old-fashioned tie under the chin look. Those are two of my favorites.